It's time for the Spoony One! Wrestling Show! It's time for the Spoony One! Wrestling Show!
WWE's pig shit right now. God damn, it's unbelievable. I know this is so fucking late. I was gonna do this as a Fastlane review, and I guess I'll do that as well, but really this is just like a complete combination, you know, the road to WrestleMania show. To explain, as you may recognize or may not, I have moved into a new house. April and I bought a house, and to explain the delays, or make excuses for it now, we've been spending the last 2 weeks just moving in. We had no furniture, so we had to buy basically a house worth of furniture. That's an adventure. The whole thing is an adventure. Unbelievable amount of stress on top of just, my God, if you've never, ever moved into a new place or ever bought a house, it's amazing. Good and stressful experience. You will melt down more than once, but wow. Then on top of that, you try to unwind with wrestling, and if you know me, that's not a good release lately. No, not at all. This show, this company is fucking terrible. And look, this could be, you know, it's, you probably think I'm prone to hyperbole. Look, whatever. This really could be the worst run I've ever seen the company go on in a long time. There may have been runs during the Attitude Era that were worse, because I'm not really one of those guys who's like, oh, wrestling was, everything was better back then. It wasn't. There was some shit runs in the Attitude Era. If you don't remember, yeah, go back and look. But this is among the shittiest. This really could be, no joke, the worst WrestleMania card in history, except for maybe the first two WrestleManias. Honestly, aside from their historical significance, were shit. You know, the main events were pretty awesome, but otherwise, the first two WrestleManias were a mess. You know, but in terms of just presentation and the matches themselves, and the way those matches have been built and presented and organized, and the participants in them, I don't think I've ever looked forward to a WrestleMania less than I have this particular one. This is really, really lackluster. It's almost like they have done everything they can to undermine the dramatic tension, undermine your interest in seeing every given match. If you had given me the task of writing a show to where you had the least amount of interest possible, I probably could have done a better job, but I don't know how. It really is crazy. It is shocking. It's the main event alone. And look, this is what I think the key is here. This isn't about Daniel Bryan. It's really not. And this isn't about Roman Reigns as the wrestler himself, as the man, as a character. This isn't about Daniel Bryan as a wrestler, as a character, so to speak. This is about, this isn't about the fans. This is about basic storytelling. This is about failure to learn from mistakes. This is just a fundamental failure in how to tell stories. See, first off, some people think that the fans have the right to dictate, why don't they listen? Why don't they just give us what we want? Why don't they just put Daniel Bryan in the main event? Why didn't they just let him win the Royal Rumble like everyone wanted? They don't, they're telling a story, first of all. So maybe that story doesn't involve Daniel Bryan winning the Royal Rumble. So first off, you're not always supposed to get what you want. So sometimes What you want, it's almost like you want ice cream all the time. So sometimes you don't know what you want. You don't always know what's best for business. So let's just assume that Roman Reigns was really the guy. And let's assume they were writing, they had a modicum of talent and storytelling, and they knew how to push this guy properly. They wrote this the right way. This would be awesome. Because you could write Roman Reigns to where you would really look forward to this main event if you had timed Daniel Bryan's return the right way. This is the real core difference here. You could have timed Daniel Bryan's return to where people might not have turned on Roman Reigns to the extreme degree that they have. I don't think they've really turned. They've managed to kind of mitigate the damage, because it's not like they don't. It's not that they don't like Roman Reigns. It's that they don't care. And that's the worst part. It's not like one way or the other, you get an emotion. Getting hated is fine. Getting loved is fantastic. It's when they don't care that you're in trouble. Batista got hated, and he sustained that because Batista is extremely charismatic. Batista has always been extremely charismatic. That's why he was fantastic during his entire run in the WWE. When he came back, he still had it. He was rusty as all hell when he came back, but he got it back. And when he won the Royal Rumble, everybody hated it. They fucked up his return as well. They completely misread all the signals. But they managed to salvage it because, for one, Batista is fantastically charismatic. And they kind of harnessed... They harnessed that hatred the audience had towards him, and they pulled it into a great heel turn. That said, I almost didn't like the way they kowtowed to fan pressure. They were like, okay, you guys can have Daniel Bryan. It's because it's like they kind of gave in. It was so obvious that they gave in to what the fans wanted. They just, it was so obvious they rewrote things. It became completely transparent that this is fake. It is, but at the same time, they might as well have just given you guys the pen. It's really not the way things should be done, if that makes sense. So, in this regard, they repeated the exact same mistakes they did before. To the point where Daniel Bryan comes out and is like, hey guys, you want to see me in the main event of WrestleMania? And we all went, yay! And everyone just kind of looked at each other and we're like, wow, they're going to do it again, aren't they? And so, basically for no reason, Triple H just goes, hey, why don't we just have a match? And if he wins for no reason, he's in the main event. Hey, Roman, you want to put your title match on the line for no reason? And Roman Reigns goes, do I have any reason to? Triple H goes, not really. He goes, okay, the match is on. And so, by the way, I was the only one who called that Roman Reigns was going over in that match clean. For once, they didn't kowtow to fan pressure and put Daniel Bryan in that match, which I think was the right move. That said, well, maybe not the right move, because that's the only thing I'm really interested to see what happens in WrestleMania is the way they react. The way they react to Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. That is going to be amazing, one way or the other. If you don't remember, look up a WrestleMania match between Brock Lesnar, ironically, and Bill Goldberg. That match is one of the worst matches of all time, and yet one of the most incredible. It is an example of one of the all-time greatest crowd hijackings of a show, in that everyone in the arena knew kind of like behind the scenes what was going on. In that they knew that Goldberg was not staying with the company, I believe. Like, that was his last night, or they were just, I believe it was his last night, or that they just didn't like him. And they definitely knew that it was Brock's last night, because he was, at the same time, kind of a part-time player. And that he was leaving to go to tryouts in the NFL with the Minnesota Vikings. That didn't go well, but they knew it was his last night. He was going to go try out with the Minnesota Vikings, so he was not going to win. So they knew the end. They knew how the match was going to end. They knew he wasn't staying, and they knew that Goldberg wasn't winning, and they hated Goldberg. Goldberg was whatever. So I don't want to say they didn't give a shit about the match, but they didn't give a shit about the match, and they completely, horribly turned on it. I don't think aside from, I don't think I've ever, maybe the Luger match. I can't remember the name of the pay-per-view, but when Flair, it was a WCW one, Spring Stampede maybe, when Flair pulled out of the title match and they had to substitute, and the entire pay-per-view they were chanting "We want Flair." They completely turned the entire pay-per-view. That was a greater crowd turning, but they completely turned on Brock and Goldberg the entire fucking match. Both of them. And the special guest referee was Stone Cold Steve Austin for weeks. The storyline was, who is Stone Cold going to be this distraction? Is he going to be a factor in this match? Is he going to call it straight down the middle? Is he going to favor each one, either one of them? So, the entire week, for weeks, he would stun one of them, he would stun the other one. There would be rumors that he was siding with one or the other. And in the end, the match was so fucked. The crowd was so thunderously shitting on the match. There were thunder shits on the match. Shit was thundering down on literally. There was shit thundering. Sloughing off both of them. They were unable to wrestle. To the point where Brock and Goldberg looked at each other, and they didn't give a shit, because there was shit all over the ring. They just did a collar and elbow tie up, and they proceeded to collar and elbow tie up, and just kind of zero ass it for about 10 minutes. They just kind of pushed for 10 minutes, and it was horrible. And eventually, Stone Cold is just leaning in the corner, because what's he going to do? And they're chanting for, at some point, the only guy they liked in that ring was Stone Cold. And he's just laying there going, I don't know, guys. And they're looking at him, and they're like, fuck you, Stone, And eventually they decide to attempt to put on, the most basic match for, 2 minutes. They throw each other into a post, and then, Goldberg goes, jackhammer, spear, whatever. Match is over. Stone Cold stuns them both, leaves. That's it. Minus 5-star match. Because it was a match so bad it harmed the business. Whatever. Go back and watch that show again. That's a train going by. There's one downside of this place is that every now and then a train goes by. It sounds, by the way, exactly like when the Paranormal Activity ghost is entering the room. It's actually very cool. But anyway, it's actually worth watching in that it's not a painful match to watch, but it's definitely one that really, really harms. You can tell it really damaged the way things have been done. And yet, here we are again. It's a thing where they've even made it part of the storyline, where it's clearly Brock's last night with the company. And yet for some reason, they've made it part of the drama. He's showing up at UFC events with Dana White. They've kind of made it into a repeat of the CM Punk angle where, is he going to leave the company with the title? There's rumors that he just walked out of a Raw production, walked out of Raw before the show, completely fucking up the show because of problems with this contract negotiation. They've been trying to re-sign him, but he got pissed off at something and just walked. So things aren't going well. A lot of rumors, a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. I can't go too far into it because I don't know shit beyond that. So I feel hesitant even talking about it because everything I'm saying is probably wrong. But apparently his contract is up at WrestleMania. So guess what? we're looking at another probable example of a Brock Goldberg situation, except it's Brock Roman Reigns. Is that what's going to happen? I don't know. Except the thing is, the difference here is that the crowd likes Brock Lesnar way more than they like Roman Reigns. So, in a way, instead of not caring, they would probably very much approve of Brock Lesnar killing Roman Reigns and leaving the company with the WWE title. Because, for one, fuck Roman Reigns, in their opinion, and two, fuck the WWE. Because every time they've got Brock Lesnar or Paul Heyman in the ring talking about him leaving the company with the title, they cheer! I don't think that's what they're intending here. They're both supposed to be heels, so when they get him in the ring, I fully think Vince is expecting people to go like, no, this is terrible! And they're cheering, this is not a good thing. I can't even... This is not a good sign. So, this is what I'm talking about when I say it's like we're looking at like a repeat of Brock Goldberg, and yet we're not. That's the only thing I'm looking forward to. Is I don't think we're going to see that. I think, well, especially a WrestleMania audience is generally like the hardest of the hardcore. You know, your Raw audience is very, very supportive. It tends to be a lot more like family. You know, you're going to get the dueling chants because the kids very much like John Cena. There's kids at WrestleMania, but it tends to be much more of the hardcores that will boo John Cena. That's why you get the really, really, more heel-friendly crowds. The kind that will just shit on John Cena. Whatever. So, honestly, it's going to be weird. I think Roman Reigns is going to have a hard time there, even though they've going to be weird. Point is, I can't even remember what my point is, but the main event is so fucked up that when they've got a story in mind, you can't just assume that they don't know what they're doing because they're not giving you what they want. It's not about that. It's about, you kind of have to trust where the story is going, but you can't do that when they're telling the story so poorly. So it's like you kind of have to write it out, but we've let it write out. And it's obvious to anyone who knows anything about any kind of storytelling that they're completely screwing it up. And this could be anybody. You could replace Daniel Bryan with anybody. With John Cena, with Dolph Ziggler, with Dean Ambrose. In fact, we have on pretty much every occasion, and they fucked it up with every single one of them. We've made them look stupid. And they've done it with Roman Reigns. Okay, so, sorry, my chair's squeaky. And the reason people don't like Roman Reigns, among many others, is that Roman Reigns looks like he has no chance. Why should we care about this guy when he looks fucking pathetic? I just promised I was going to go over Fastlane, and I'm just already shooting the main event, but this is important, damn it. Roman Reigns looks fucking pathetic. Here's an example. The main event of Fastlane was the triple threat John Cena, Seth Rollins, and Brock Lesnar. The story of which was that... Wait, was it? It's been so long I can't remember. Where's my fucking notes? I can't remember my notes. Whatever. One of them was that Brock Lesnar was fucking immortal, and they had to team up, essentially. These two mortal enemies had to team up and attempt to kill this man with chairs and tables and cars and anvils and, the most spectacular elbow drop through a table you've ever seen in your life, putting him through the barricades. They had to stretcher Brock Lesnar out, or attempt to, whatever, and he got up like the fucking Terminator, and he still was throwing them around with F5s and German suplexes like they were nothing, right? So this guy could not be killed with conventional weaponry. This guy is a fucking machine. So this guy has the most legitimacy, so to speak. These two guys, Seth Rollins and John Cena, could not, they had to cooperate. Basically, John Cena on his own had to team up with one of his worst enemies to take this guy out. And they failed! That's how badass this guy is, in the story. So, even now, when this guy hits the ring, shit goes down. He's the only guy they're doing things right with. Him and Randy Orton. In terms of, portraying their characters as badass. And Bray Wyatt to an extent, but whatever. Brock Lesnar is the only guy who, when he hits the ring, people die. So, he's perfect. The way they're booking him is perfect. Nobody can beat this guy. Because he comes from hell. So, then you have Roman Reigns, who is beating nobody. Pretty much nobody. He wins the Royal Rumble. Then what happens to him? They put him in a number of really long, boring matches with The Big Show and Kane. And he's winning those matches. But he's winning matches against The Big Show and Kane. They're long, boring matches the crowd doesn't give a shit about. You need matches the crowd can get excited about. He needs to have fast, hard-hitting, impactful offense. He needs to be picking dudes up and throwing them around to showcase his awesome strength and speed and devastating strength, like Brock Lesnar. Because let's do an example even of what Brock Lesnar was doing to The Big Show on the show before Fastlane. He fucking F5'd The Big Show. But he didn't just F5 The Big Show, he F5'd the shit out of The Big Show. He F5'd that man over his head and drilled him to the center of the fucking earth. It was to the point where April and I were watching that shit go down, and we both went, "Oh!" And we rewound it and watched it again and went, "Oh!" We rewound it and watched it again and went, "Oh!" That's how fucking hard he F5'd The Big Show. I ain't seen Roman Reigns do shit. He did one suicide dive over the top rope that was cool, I guess, question mark. It wasn't no F5 on The Big Show, and it wasn't in a long, boring match with The Big Show. Brock Lesnar has not had any long, boring matches with anybody. And here's the funny thing. The reason for that is he hasn't been on fucking Raw having matches. And yet, he's more over than anybody else on the fucking roster. So the moral here is, the best way to get over is not to be on the fucking show. Here's what you do. From day one that he came back from his injury, Roman Reigns should have been killing men. They should have put him in matches against smaller dudes, jobbers, whatever, smaller guys, and have him running through them like they were nothing, like Brock Lesnar would have been doing. Spear the shit out of them. Superman punch the shit out of them. Wasteland. Leave bodies in his wake. You need to make this guy look like Superman. Make him look unstoppable. Because you have to make this guy look untouchable, because he has to look like a match for Brock Lesnar. Because Brock Lesnar cannot be stopped. Instead, what happens? He gets rolled up and pinned by Seth Rollins. He's getting distracted and pinned. I lost count of how many times he's been pinned on Raw. This last couple of weeks, he was in a match with Seth Rollins And Seth Rollins was giving him all he could handle. The biggest pussy on the Authority, who spent weeks, months, running away at the slightest sign of resistance, who ran away from the ketchup and mustard man, was beating up Roman Reigns in a fairly long and involved match. Beating him up. Beating up the number one contender for the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania. No, this is not what should be happening. This is not nitpicking. You have to make this guy look like a killer. Nobody's going to care about this. Because this is the guy who is the 1 in 21 and 1. This is the guy who beat The Undertaker. You have to make this guy look like a guy who also could have beaten The Undertaker. Do I believe that Roman Reigns could have beaten The Undertaker? No, sir. I do not. Do I believe that he could beat Brock Lesnar? No. I believe that he would try to spear Brock Lesnar and bounce off his fucking abs, and then Brock would eat him with a side of a Jimmy John's sub. Because Roman Reigns is getting schoolboy pinned like everyone else on the Raw roster. He's getting beaten like everyone else. And that doesn't help that they haven't been giving him those stupid promos, but, right after the fucking Rumble, they've been giving those ridiculous goddamn promos. And let's face it, I'm sorry, I've been hearing his promos that, his good promos, so to speak, they're not that good. The guy needed to look like... They needed to have him look like a guy... Okay. In their mind, they're trying to turn him into John Cena 2.0. And they were booking John Cena the wrong way. They always have. And yet, and here's where I'll throw out the flaw in my own argument. John Cena's the biggest star ever, so... But they've always booked John Cena the wrong way. They've always booked John Cena as the plucky underdog. Always. And he's not. He's indestructible. He's got a healing factor like fucking Weapon X. They always push him as the underdog when he's beaten everybody. He can easily beat everybody. He doesn't sell anything. But no, he's, every single title match, every single main event, they always go on about how the odds are stacked against him, how he's going to rise above the odds. Seriously. Every single one. He's got to rise above these crazy odds, and somehow he does. He's always the underdog. And look what they're doing with Roman Reigns. He's the plucky underdog. Everyone's saying you can't beat Roman Reigns. You can't beat Brock Lesnar. You can't. That's the thread running through this main event feud is you can't beat Brock Lesnar. And he's is I can, I will, I can. And so that's, when the matches they've been putting him in against the Big Show and Kane, they think they're doing him a favor. They think, well, we're putting him in matches against bigger guys. We're putting him in matches against the giants, the monsters of the Raw roster. The giants of the Authority. And, we're having him get beaten up the entire match by Kane and the Big Show. And somehow he overcomes those giants twice a week. Every fucking week. He overcomes those odds and he wins in boring fucking matches. And yeah, he overcomes those odds, but you know what? That's not what he needs to be doing. He needs to be fast, explosive, destructive. And yeah, no, that's not what they're doing. They're doing it wrong. Roman Reigns is not the kind of guy who should be selling. It seems, I know it's hypocritical for me to say that, in the same breath that John Cena is the guy who doesn't sell anything, and yet he's playing the underdog. Roman Reigns should not be selling anything, especially in a match against Brock Lesnar. If they're gonna go if they're gonna go the route of unstoppable force meets immovable object, they need to make Roman Reigns look an equal to Brock Lesnar. You play the underdog card with a guy like Daniel Bryan, who's going to use his speed and technique against Brock Lesnar's brute force and technique. Because the size difference is monumental. But you don't do plucky underdog with Roman Reigns, who looks like a monster himself. Anyway, this is but an example of how they've completely just on their head just booked this guy completely wrong. In my mind, and they're not going to do this. Well, unless they're brilliant, they won't do this. In the main event, they should, by all rights, have Brock Lesnar do exactly to Roman Reigns what he did to John Cena at SummerSlam, and from bell to bell destroy him. Like he's nothing. As Paul Heyman said, Ronda Rousey his ass. Although Ronda Rousey beat what's her face, although that's telling I can't remember her name. In about, probably wouldn't be a good idea to do this. Probably, I think beat her in like 8 seconds, something like that. Probably should last longer than that, but the smart thing to do, especially considering how badly they've booked Roman Reigns, is have Brock Lesnar kill him, just outright, just wipe the mat with him, humiliate him. Because so far, he's shown us nothing. He beat Daniel Bryan in the one match. And I'm trying to... Yeah. Oh, God. And the crowd turned on that, too. But... And you could be like, well, that's the one thing, that he proved you could say, well, it proved he belonged in that upper tier. It proved he can beat Daniel Bryan, who's a guy about half his size, but then you're like, well, he runs into the buzzsaw. He can't beat a guy like Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar should destroy him. He won't, but because you got to figure Roman Reigns is going to at least win that match. But it's going to be weird. But I would be amazed and thrilled, really, if Brock Lesnar just eradicated him just like that. Because from a in-character from an in-character, from the point of view of in-character, whatever, it would be amazing and appropriate to see this guy just get out-fought, out-techniqued. Technique would be the big thing. Because you've got these two guys who... let's just say they're equals in brute force. Really, I would still give the edge to Brock. But let's say they're equals in brute force. In terms of fighting ability, you've got Brock, who's, a former mixed martial arts champion, and you've got Roman Reigns, who is not. By all accounts, if we're taking this again, if this were real, Brock should, let's just say Brock takes him down with a mixed martial, a double leg takedown and Kimura's him. And then Ronda Rousey's his ass with a Kimura. That would be amazing. I'd love that. And, out of nowhere, Roman's taps. And you're like... he got MMA'd, man. That would be great. But... As for the story where they're like, I really liked the fact that the idea that they're involving the concept that Brock might be leaving the company with the title. And yet the more I thought about it, the less I like it. Because it's a very real possibility that he is leaving the company. And it's kind of a repeat of the CM Punk thing. And because it raises shades of the CM Punk thing, I wonder why they would do that. And I guess the reason they would do that is because everyone knows about it already. So they're trying to defuse the tensions. Yeah, I don't know. And yet they're under very real risk that, they're... Brock is like playing mind games with these guys, from a negotiating standpoint, because he could go anywhere. Literally anywhere. He could go to Ice Capades if he wanted to. Everyone would pay this guy because he's so much in demand. This guy is just amazing. I keep saying amazing. But, he apparently he very much wants to try another run at UFC. He very much wants to try another run at a legit sport. But he could go anywhere. And so I figure if WWE wants him, they're going to have to pay out the ass. Pull money out of their ass and then shine it up and pay it to him. And I don't think he wants to come back there. He'll go back if they pay him enough, but the proverbial dump truck full of money. But it's very strange that they're bringing it up, and yet I don't even know how to describe it. But I like when they had him on camera talking about he does the best interviews on those taped segments because he has that. He is really one of the best promos in the company because he has that unique personality where he comes off as so real. He is real, but when he says like he's talking about the Undertaker, and he says, I looked around and I saw all those faces of heartbreak, all those stunned faces when I beat the Undertaker. I beat the dead man. I broke this 21-year streak, and I just don't care. It was, to me, for everyone else, it was the end of this 21-year historic streak and the end of some mystical dead man, and to me it was a payday. I didn't care. And I'm gonna go to WrestleMania and I'm gonna beat this dumbass's brains in, and it's just gonna be another payday. And one way or the other, I'm gonna walk out of WrestleMania with the title. And I'm either gonna be with the company and have the title, or I'm not gonna be with the company. I'm gonna have the title. And I'm gonna fuck up Roman Reigns. And that's what he said. I'm gonna fuck up Roman Reigns. And I'm like, this guy's amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. He really does. And it's because I think he really doesn't care. He's just got that attitude to where it's a mixture of doesn't give any fucks and like wry amusement that everyone is taking, the wry amusement that people how to explain his attitude, that wry amusement that people that there are people, I don't know, that people still even oppose him, because they're just so small. It's cute, it's like this Roman Reigns guy. It's cute. I'm gonna fuck him up. It's almost like he can't believe that, Roman Reigns won the Rumble, and he knows I'm in this match, right? He does, and he's still gonna show. It's. I love the guy. And yet Roman Reigns is doing this really droning, I can't, I will, believe that. Anyway. I'm done ranting about that. I'm going to cut this off here, and then I'm going to talk about Fastlane.